Welcome to Seeds for Our Future, Conversations and Explorations with Renee Baribeau, the Practical Shaman. Renee is a wind whistler and a Nautilus Award-winning Hay House author. She is a go-to soul coach for innovative change makers and dynamic spiritual keynote speakers. She injects humor and practical wisdom into her inspirational windwork virtual retreats. Learn more at thepracticalshaman.com. Welcome, Renee. Welcome, Renee. I'm really happy to be talking with you today. Let's start with your sense of the seeds we need to plant for the collective and for ourselves, for our spiritual evolution.
Hey, Meg, it's great to be here with you today. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about seeds because just a couple of weeks ago, when I took the new apprentices on a journey, I took them to see Boreas, the North Wind, mm-hmm. And when to get there, this reminds me of your journey over the holidays. He took us under we had to go under his veil, like his wind veil, to go in there to get some seeds. And of course, being that when this was going on, it was still a little bit winter, so that I believe this is true as also as part of the cycle that we're in. I think we're just as a collective moving into the winter cycle of this transformation, so that what we've harvested and what we've learned from the past is now kind of in a deep thaw. And the deep thaw is, as things settle out, the seeds that will become the right timing for these seeds, they're going to grow when the timing's right. And so I don't know. I think we're still holding the seeds as opposed to planting the seeds. And, we like to hurry things along. But if you think about this Earth rotation and evolution as something that's been going on for 4 billion years, and that I think that we're really moving between the Holocene and the Anthropocene, which you so eloquently put, the age of extinction. And so it may be that we need to hold on to our seeds really tight right now, because we don't know what's going to make it through that extinction period. And so it may be that we need to plant these seeds a little bit later into the future than we're even planning at the moment.
What about people who haven't thought about seeds to plant or access them? What kind of advice would you give them? I mean, here we are in the middle of the transformation.
Yeah, well, I would say that it's a good time to look at your last year's harvest. And being that last year was the year that we were put on a timeout. And I think I really believe that time had sped up so fast that this timeout was almost like a reset of the clock. And why I believe that is that I was supposed to go see the Passion Play last year. And I really think that to have that kind of an epic journey, or like, a spiritual journey, to be happen, and then in the year of COVID when it was canceled. And not only was it canceled, but this has been going on since the Black Plague. It started, the Passion Play in Germany started during the Black Plague. And here we are, hundreds of years later in this new plague, and it gets canceled. And it's my, it's my pilgrimage of sorts. Why I was going there, I don't even know. And my friends thought, like, why are you going to go see the Passion Play of all things? And I thought, I don't really know. But then I realized that it was a really clear marker for me that it didn't happen. It was the year I didn't go to the Passion Play. It was the year that the time started to bend itself and reset itself, because the construct that we had created, 12,000, 15,000 years ago no longer serves us. Right. So it doesn't, so what is the difference of 2 years when you're resetting an entire clock? So I suggest to people to really go back and look at, what were you doing during the year that we were socially isolated, kind of like a forced into our own cave kind of situation. And how did you respond?
Mhm.
Were you one of those people who responded out of fear and ran and, got more rolls of toilet paper than you probably will use for the next 4 years? Or were some of us were called into action? I mean, I didn't stop. Some people stopped. I was working double time. Some
It's
people,
interesting. I was the opposite. All the messages I got a year ago were to slow down and to stop. And I was so grateful because, like a lot of us, I'd gotten on a roller coaster of, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. So I really pulled in and it was lovely.
yeah, that's really great. But it was the year that the wind took off. It was
Mm,
the year that the wind work really, the wind was let out of the bag, and so to speak, and so it like it moved in for the next epoch, and I wasn't paying attention to astrology, so I didn't wasn't really aware that we had moved into an air age.
mm.
Again, contrived and all, but it's still that we're moved now into a era of Aquarius and air signs. And so I was pretty busy, but interestingly enough, from my wind sack this year, I pulled the doldrums, which means no wind.
Hmm.
So, but I'm still busy, so I haven't quite haven't quite grasped what this all means. But that I'm changing where I want to live,
Hmm.
how I want to show up in the world, and I'm starting to take away things that are no longer important to me. So, you know, what I would suggest to some of you is open up your hand and look at what seeds you have and find out, they might be moldy, they might be old, they may not be serving you, and ask your guides to give you which of those seeds should you, put into the seed bank,
Hmm.
and so that they'll germinate when the time is right.
When you said the seed bank, I thought of that place that's in Greenland, I think. They built it in the ice to preserve all the seeds on the earth. And it was in the permafrost and stuff. And of course, the permafrost has been melting. And and there's no reason to, in that situation, to choose particular seeds, but they were putting all of them in.
Hmm.
And you're suggesting that if this is a time of clearing out and elimination and really looking at what serves us.
Right, because we've gotten really far away from the core of our natures. And so, this, for example, if you just want to use the example of genetically modified seeds, well, toss them. We don't, I mean, is
Really?
in the truth of the genetically modified seeds, a friend of mine is a farmer, and when Borloff, I think his name was, when he invented the genetically modified seed, it wasn't it was to feed people who were starving. It wasn't a bad thing, but like our human greed, and we can take things that are like good and want them, like it's like eating ice cream every single night. Once a week it could be good for you, but if you find yourself eating a pint a day, it's not so good. So I think that finding out what seeds are even going to grow as we move forward, with the climate heating up, some seeds aren't going to grow anymore.
So what about um, shifting the trajectory of human perception? I mean, modified seeds is a good example. Most people just buy whatever in the store and don't think about it because it's too much trouble. Some of us go to great lengths uh, to use seeds that are heritage, but that's a small bit. But the larger picture of this trajectory of greed and anger and otherness, all this stuff that's going on in the world.
I think as time bends, and that's one of the processes I teach, is time bends, that it allows for splitting off. And I really believe that, I started feeling this a few years ago, that we aren't all on the same, we're not all in the same reality any longer. This is not, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. And and I used to feel that a couple of years ago. I'd be in the bank and I would think like, wow, those people are living in a different space than I am. And so I think that this place we're in of this disharmony is about finding your right place and your right space, because really the what I've learned from the wind work is that we navigate from our own wheelhouse. I can't navigate from yours and you can't navigate from mine. So if I want to choose to be living in a paradigm where, we're working together using heritage seeds, um, being more resourceful and simplifying our life, that's human beings. We've been given a lot of choices.
Mhm.
And so, and if other people want to live in their paradigm, they get to do that too. And I think back to, oh, I can't even think of the woman. I saw some woman years ago at Naropa who was talking about that the Vatican knew how to use energy just as much as we shamans did or us healers did. And so that there's all of that magic going on over in their realm, and there's all this magic going on in our realm. And who knows, maybe our bubbles will divide and they'll go off to be in oneness in their zone, and we'll be in our own zone. But because it was really difficult for me these last couple of years trying to make sense that good spiritual people that I were friends with were on the other side of the political fence and the truth fence and all of this. And I know that these people journey and these people have their higher selves and stuff like that. And there was just like, you know, where's the false god here? And I can't believe that there is a false god in my worldview. So I kind of believe that we've come to a crossroad in our humanity where some people are going to be, and I don't want to put them on a hierarchy, but some people are going to move over here and some people are going to live over here.
That's really interesting. I recently discovered a woman in my journey group is an anti-vaxxer, and I was so shocked I hardly knew what to do because, like you said, she's uh, really a smart person, and I don't know where she got there. So it's a kind of mystery that we're all holding. How did
Mm-hmm.
so many people go to these other places? I mean, partly it's the cultural trance we talk about, and partly it's a lot of misinformation, but that doesn't really explain it.
It really doesn't explain it when you think about like really good, solid people that you've known in your spiritual circles for years who, are now sitting in a different perspective than you are. And so I've always been one to say, well, I don't know where the truth is. It's probably somewhere between your perspective and my perspective. So I end up reading, news from one end to the other to try to get a sense of, how are people thinking like this, or where are they sourcing that information. And some things that I will say is that some of us, like you and I, we are way more grounded into the earth.
Right.
And a lot of the people who are now experiencing these other perspectives that I don't totally disagree with. I mean, some of it, it's a gray line where I can understand where I don't believe in one of the things, like I don't believe in taking our freedom of speech away, period. And so I get caught in the circle of it. But I noticed that a lot of the people who have banded on the other realm, let's call it another realm, we're more atmosphere seekers. We're more, I'm with the wind, but it's still a earth
Well, it's
element.
interesting if they're in the atmosphere, what's going to happen to them in an air sign now, right?
Yeah, well, they'll either float away over to they'll find their way to the skies, back to the stars quicker. I don't know, but I know that for me, trying to help people find the similarities with their neighbors is kind of like my mission.
Hmm.
Like now I'm living up on an island. when the power goes out for 4 days and we're around, I just wrote an article about this. A big 60-foot tree fell, not to speak about an initiation, in my new front yard. And all the neighbors gathered, and not one person mentioned anything about politics or so. Like a natural disaster puts people back into the present moment where they have to come together as a community. And and not that I suspect we'll experience more and more extreme weather events coming up, and hopefully it'll be through the extreme that we will find our way back together. Now,
Well, that brings us up to, this. I've become really interested in coherence and trust in groups and how you consciously can create coherence. And you're bringing up one example. The outside world has created a disaster, and everyone has to come together. As spiritual teachers and leaders in our community and just as people, what do you think about? Do you have any thoughts about uh, coming into coherence and how you do? I mean, you certainly do that in your groups, in your teaching, and it feels that's one of the seeds that I think we need to hold, is how we explore that, because the trust thing is what allows us to talk to each other.
and how I think that I hold that is that I believe that we have to create enough spaciousness in our groups to let people be who they are and have their way with themselves. For example, I have a little mini pod that kind of holds the directions for the apprenticeship program. And, we watched one person bounce in and out of the group for 2 years, just couldn't get fully in. And, I had for me, the lesson was, okay, when won't I get triggered by this anymore?
Yeah.
And so finally, I was like, well, finally, I just one day said to her, you know, you deserve this. You deserve the support that this kind of group that allows you to run in and out and trample all over everyone's feelings. And we still love you and say you can be in the group. You deserve that kind of unconditional love. And and I just, that was, there was no emotion on it. It was just,
Uh,
you deserve this, your loss. And and it cycled back around, and to let the other people have their feelings in it of like, like not understanding and trying to justify it. And it's just like, it's just really a time where you have to understand that most of the people who are on this planet at this point have been here many, 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 many times, if you believe in that kind of thing. We're pretty wise souls. The children coming in, I don't even know where they're coming from. I was doing a healing once on a mother, and I said, I don't really work on pregnant women. And I said, but I'll look at this one thing for you. And the the fetus said to me, don't you come near me. You don't even have what I need. And I knew it was true.
uh,
So, because I'm kind of like the changing of the guards right now.
mhm.
The old guards don't have what the next people need. And so there's a lot of, so there's this coherence for me, is understanding that the resistance will always show you your own piece of work,
Hmm.
nothing to do with the other guy or girl. It's always something in me that
In
I can.
in your group situation, getting back to the example you gave of the person who was in and out and how much trouble that was causing, not just you but everybody, um, how did you help the group hold that so that people could let it go and not take, the things that we would do? Oh, that person doesn't like me, that's why they're not in the group, or that kind of personalization of some behavior that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I just kept opening the space a little bit more, so that now they fully stepped in finally, um and committed in a way. But you can't ever, somebody else, I work in addiction treatment and mental health. if we deny the other person the dignity of their bottom,
Mm.
we're always holding them right above the healing.
Oh, interesting.
So sometimes you just have to let people drop all the way into their own pain so that they could get out of that. And I think that in this particular situation, it was like, okay, well, we're moving over to another group and you're not going to be part of it. I didn't do it rashly. And I find if you don't do it, when you have no energetics on it, it doesn't stick. It doesn't cling. And
I see.
so now we're trying it in a bigger group setting because we have 42 students in the year long program, and so now we're seeing if that four works in four bigger groups,
Hmm.
and it's going to be it's an interesting experiment, and I'll let you know how it goes.
So did the person you spoke to about you deserve that, did she get it?
When I said to her, uh, "You deserve this," she was so pissed at me. Like she thought that, like, how dare I put this judgment on her. And I just said it, and I just said it like like the wind that I can be, and just was done with it. It was interesting because it didn't trigger two of the people in the group, and one person it did. And so there was like all of this. But I learned about that through my own one of my own shamanic teachers, when we all did medicine work one night, and then she made us have a real conversation with each other. And for
Mm.
some reason they were all they not were mad at me, but they didn't like how I was a bully. And it was a really hard thing to hear. But when three people tell you, you're being a really bully in our, we were growing together for 10 years, you're the bully, Renee. And
Oh.
I was like, I thought I felt ganged up upon at first. And then I realized, yeah, I can be a bully. I want my own way. And, but then I realized that if I was going to hold that circle for other people, that I couldn't charge my way through life and,
Mm.
and get, the dust in the wind type of thing. So I understand there's a certain level of personal work you can do alone, and then there's a certain sophistication of that work that needs to be done in community. And I think if we really listen to what the COVID's telling us, is that yes, you can learn online, but you have to be able to take it back to your neighborhood where you're living. There's just, if somehow the bridge blew up or the boat couldn't go, this is your community.
Oh, yeah,
So how do you get along with the animals in your neighborhood?
yeah. Um, I've been working for the last year, meeting every week with a group of four other women, um, doing energy work in the pyramid, that journey that I took everyone on at solstice. And we've all known each other to a greater, lesser degree for a long time. But of course, the niddly things that bug people have come up. And it's been beautiful to see how people dealt with them, and sometimes would have side conversations for just sort of support, like I'm not crazy that this is happening. Um, but all of us are so committed to flowing with this work that we're making huge efforts to be really full of heart and respectful with each other, even though so and so has some irritating quality that drives me up the wall.
We all do, right?
Right. You can't get away from that. Um, and that's what's made me think a lot about coherence and trust, because I've been in other groups for a long time where the leaders didn't really develop that. And I was assuming, I'm an idealist, so I was assuming that everybody was my friend and I trusted them. And then when things would blow up, I realized that that was entirely my fantasy.
Yeah, and that's kind of the old leadership style. Like, I always tell my students, hey, the guru is dead.
Mm.
Just because I sat down for 7 years and worked on bringing this work in, this is work for the next 100, 200 years. You're the ones who are going to show us, you're the ones who are going to develop this work. Not, don't look to me like that I have any answers other than I have a couple more years on you. But this is work that the community has to bring in together. And and so, in some areas of my life, I like to be the boss, and I certainly like to be in center stage, but I I would be a fool to sit here and tell you that I know anything about the wind.
Well,
You
that's what's
know,
beautiful about shamanism, because it's not your ego that's at work. It's your spirits are helping you and to see the world in a different way.
right? And they give me new lessons when I'm ready. Like the work didn't come in, just so if people have read Winds of Spirit, the work did not come in fully formed.
Hmm.
The work came in with a an outline. Here's 32 winds you can start with, but there's hundreds of them out there. This is a good place to start. And it was like a couple years teaching before I was understood what it meant to have to work with the cardinal wind,
Hmm.
because I didn't know which way I was facing or which way the wind was blowing. And finally one day, okay, now you're ready for that next lesson.
Huh.
And so, like, luckily for me, I jumped 2 feet first in, because other people would still be sitting there trying to figure out how to write the book. And I'm like, all right, well, what's the next book?
Yeah. So before we get to that, I think you're lucky that it only took you 7 years, because I spent pretty much 20 years knowing that two pieces of my training were related, medicine for the earth and the Andean cosmovision. And I
Uh-huh.
knew they were connected. I knew it was about light, and I could not figure it out. And I didn't have anybody to ask. So I just had to keep asking spirit and working with it until I saw it come together.
That's kind of what I liked about the Peruvian cosmovision stuff, was that they, maybe because they lived at the top of that mountain for so long, that they didn't see any separation. Like when I first went to Peru, my sweat lodge leader was furious at me for carrying the chanupa down to Peru.
Really?
Uh, oh yeah, it was not a I mean, they took the pipe away. I mean, there was a long story, but the and Don Manuel just said, like, through his translators, oh, they just don't know. They were the Spanish conquistadors in their last lifetime. Like, in his, that's kind of how he was. It was like, oh, they just can't remember their last lifetimes when they were the perpetrator. And so I learned early that we're all the perpetrators, we're all the victims, we we've been here enough time that we embody all of those things. And where the separation occurs is when we forget. It's when we forget. Then
Yeah.
we like, they're doing something to me. Well, no, they're not. This is just people getting their way through this world.
That's very interesting. Years and years ago, I was in a medicine journey and was taken back in time, back to single-celled creatures, actually. So I
Hmm.
went through all my ancestral lines and way, way back. And so I'm very fond of single-celled creatures now, because they're my ancestors, right? But in that journey, I saw how there were healers and there were thieves and there were everything in my ancestral line. And it really, I never did a lot of work with ancestors directly, but it really told me exactly what you're saying, that we've all been them all, and it's not like the line is good or bad or indifferent.
Yeah, it's us who, we've come to a place where we want to quantify or qualify.
Mm.
And I don't think that that serves us really well. And we're always so busy comparing ourselves to what we think the other has. I
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to write this book called Another Other, when there really is no other.
Mm.
It's just, there is no other. And once we realize that, it's just, and that's what I love so much about the wind, is that we all breathe the same wind.
Right.
When everyone always said, oh, we're all one, I couldn't, it was like, gag me. But then when I understood that when you breathe out the wind, I'm sending out down to you, Meg. You're going to get my wind. And then, so better, I should send it with good intention than an ill wind that's going to go traveling around the world. So I guess if you were going to say, what kind of seeds do I think you should plant? I should preface that by when you create that breath, because I think the alchemy happens with the breath, that it's, you can say all the nice words you want, but if the breath is coming out with like hatred, it's going to have, even if you make $1 million, if that's your goal, it's going to come out with an ugly spin on it. But if you can get that breath as pure as possible, knowing that we're breathing from the same lung, and knowing that what's good for me needs to be good for you, then at the basis level, then we can really stand a chance to come together.
That's really well put. I feel that way about all the elements, actually, because we have all the elements in our body. So I have this little practice. We have a rain gauge, and every day when I'm emptying it, what I do first is I thank the rains, which have gone all around the world, and I
Mm-hmm.
drink them. And it's this totally wonderful connection. And then,
Right.
I write down how many small amounts of rain we got, and move on. But it's built over time into this, just this flow of relationship with water that's deeper than what I had before, even though I was connected with water before. And so I read someplace that we're breathing the air that Genghis Khan and dinosaurs breathed. And
Absolutely. We're in a closed, if you think about it, we're in a
yeah,
closed
we're
system.
totally closed. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why the wind, and the elements, the wind is there at all the creation stories, because it's what gave us space to have life on this planet. When if things were collapsed, there was no space.
Hmm.
And so some of the wind mythology, like Tyra Matea from New Zealand, Rangi and Papa, the earth and the sky, and this is kind of could go to our conflicting viewpoints right now. So say we're the earth and they're the sky, or whoever they are. I'm not, and that there's no wind between us. There's no air to breathe. So what we need is for that wind to come in to give us a little bit of separation, so that we can find our complementary, how that serves each other.
And that's another beautiful thing about the Andean cosmovision, the idea of complementarity.
Right.
It's so different than our culture, where everything has to be separate, and this is different for me and that's different for me.
So yeah, so that's what so really drew me there, and actually pulled me away from the sweat lodge, because that I thought, yeah, that makes so much sense to me, that there's always this balance between, you know, what is it, the Yananti and the Asinti, the
Yanantan and Masintan, yeah.
yeah, and never was very good with the languaging, but I understood that that made sense.
Yeah. Well, it's like why I kept going back was people were so joyful, and I'd never been anywhere where I'd seen that, experienced that joy. And I thought, I want to know how they're doing this.
Right. I want some of that. I'm wondering, like, I haven't been into Peru in about 6 years, and I'm wondering, how the joy is feeling now that we've, really destroyed their indigenous cosmologies to some extent, and they're all the kids are poor and no food, but have cell phones, and and I think Don Manuel used to say that we would become, we would become the ones who hold that vision next.
Hmm.
And so I try to live up to that every single day, because he blew my rights into my head, and I take that with, not, as one of those pivotal moments.
And it's serious stuff. It's a big responsibility, not a heavy responsibility, but just if you see something that makes sense and uh, creates harmony in the world, then you want to maintain it and continue it as much as possible. Do you want to, in your group, do you want to talk a little bit about co-creation, how you encourage people within the group to step up and not just not making you the guru, but engage with each other. I mean, I kind of know some of the ways, but I want you to talk about it.
Well, one way we have right now in the 10-month apprenticeship program or teachers training is that I have 4 assistants. And, again, we're not talking about like, in Saunders teachers training, she had like 30 years of, a body of work that was she was bringing forward. We're talking about new work. So it's kind of imperative that I can not hold on to the wind. And um, so they're each leading their own group. And there is no like, when I was in training, it was like, this is our method, this is our method, and this is our method. I'm kind of curious to see where each of those 4 groups go this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that in the process we're not coming out with, teachable work for people, because there's certain basic processes we've come up with now, but that we let the wind have its way with you. Like somebody was trying to tell me a couple weeks ago in the shaman's cave that I was selling the wind, and I'm there like, oh no, I'm not selling the wind. I'm selling my 30 years of teaching experience, my coaching, and the fact that I'm a business executive. And so I could teach you how to market. That's what I'm selling. I said, the wind, it's free. That, because like we've had wind believers come in, right? People come in, work, do the wind work, and they became good Christians, or they became weavers, you know, because it's available for us all. In fact, it was available for us all until about 12,500 years ago, when all of a sudden we were told we needed an intermediary to get with spirit. We moved from the outside to the inside, put our wind eyes up, and then closed our doors. And then we had to go to the churches and the synagogues to find out what God was saying to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we believed that. It worked out for a long, long time, but it's not working out anymore. And so, if you can go outside, take a wind walk, which is to ask a direct question, wait till you get kissed upon your cheek by the wind, feel a little wind movement, and then take a walk, you're going to get some information.
And that you're bringing up something that is really crucial, and that's what some people call sovereignty and some people call inner authority, that we have to take that. And when we've been learning that as women, how to do that for a bunch of years now, but as a culture, that's part of the transition, to let go of the patriarchal leader model and have our internal authority to see where to go.
Well, otherwise, we're gonna be knee deep in sludge, because we from 1950 to now, we've there's been a steady decline in butts and seats at the church pews. And also there's a correlating number for people then spending less time in nature, of all things. And so, and as we dissolved our churches, and I say we threw away the baby with the bathwater kind of idea. I'm spiritual but not religious. Well, it's about what's your spiritual practice to me. But that people became depressed, addicted, the higher rates of addiction and suicide and stuff like that is because we didn't step out into nature. In fact, not only weren't we going to church, but we weren't going out into the forest. And so there that made room for the internet to become our demigod.
Mm.
And so we have to find the replacement, or for me, I try to take a wind walk every single day, because I could work 12, 15 hours a day, and if I stop and go out, everything shifts. I come back into center in myself, and then I get to choose what I want to do with the rest of the day. And
not only that, but you enter back into whatever you were doing in your work in a whole different energy.
absolutely, and I usually get inspiration.
It's an energy that's connected and part of, not isolated.
Right.
Not that what I've seen called radical individualism. it's radical because the individual has become so important in the society that, uh, you know, the fact that we live next door and I'm not cutting down my brush and a fire is going to come through and burn your house up is irrelevant to me. I have the right to, you know, do what I want on my property, kind of thing. And it's way extreme, and it's disrespectful of all of our connections.
Well, it's very self-centered. And when one of the things that when you really do deeper personal work, you become more conscious of the whole. I'll never forget, I was sitting in Park City, like I was just beginning the medicine wheel work, and there were these people in the room who had done a lot of the work talking about world issues and world concerns, and I'm thinking, like, I just want to get out of the pain I'm in. And so if you're still in that place, like, I just want to get out of the pain that I'm in, so I want to keep my brush, then you'll burn in your own fire. Because it's not a it's we've we've crossed the threshold. We this COVID, you might as well put it like, one of those wheel spinners. Well, we just crossed the threshold and we're not going back. And so if this isn't a good enough lesson for you why you want to wake up, then I hope the next one's not more dramatic where you live, because to me, this one is pretty big, that that we're out in nature with our masks on, unable to see people's smiles. This is a pretty big threshold we just crossed as humanity together, and how we want to rebuild that together. Like, one of the things that I realized during this time was that, like, how dare I be trumping all over the world, visiting people's sacred sites just because I could get on a plane and do it.
Mm.
I think I got enraged when they were building that new international airstrip in outside of Cusco, and then I thought to myself, like, well, I took advantage of that for years, and the only difference was it was undiscovered at that point.
Mm.
But I was leading the way to the discovery. And when I finally left Peru, about must have been about 8-9 years ago, I thought to myself, like, we've really stripped people of their ways, and one day people like Meg and I are going to have to go back there and teach them again. And that made me really sad.
I hope that's not that bad. You think it is?
You I don't know, but that was my take on it. And you know it's I don't know. It'd be hard to know until you're like,
Yeah.
you just don't know.
So, one kind of final question, as I think about spirit and creating the world anew, I've thought more and more about spiritual activism, which means action in the world for the whole, coming from a place in connection with spirit. Do you want to say anything about that?
I think you know that you're coming from a place of spirit when you show up in service and you're not in resentment.
Mm.
You give from a place of, I have abundance, and there's enough to give a little bit over there and a little bit over there. I've noticed in the last couple of years of that some people are just takers of the world. They're not generous with their time, they're not generous with their spirit, they're not generous with their money. And and it's like a what's in it for me. And so I think that what's in it for me is that we all got the virus. You know what I mean? That we're all here. And so I hope that now we can, like, turn that out to say, like, um let's try to live a little bit more in planetary harmony, so that we're not isolated from each other, having this false sense of connection through our Zooms.
Mm.
Like the other day, my neighbors, they all built we only get a couple days of snow, but we were all out there tobogganing, and
Oh,
it was so much fun. It was like my little kid, it was like, this is how I want to spend my afternoon on a Sunday,
right.
and so that's available to me if I can find what brings me together with other people instead of what separates me.
That's a great example. Did you know any people there when you moved?
Well, I have some friends, but when the snowstorm hit, I know my neighbor. Like tonight, she's cooking dinner and bringing me over plate. Tomorrow, and one night I mean, there's neighbors, there's connection.
Mm.
I did have some friends up here before I moved, but I haven't. I've seen them limited too because we're all not being too social at the moment, and I've been so busy since I got here.
Yeah. No, I just wondered because it's hard to go into a new community. You come
The
from
first
a
time
place where you have a million connections, and then
I came over on the ferry 10 years ago, it felt like home,
mm,
and I easily made friends here. And one time I moved to Taos, and the mountain kicked me off, within a couple of months. So you're either welcomed or not welcomed.
yeah.
And if you're living in a place where you're not welcome, it might be a good time to move.
I suppose we could apply that to moving off the planet too. You
People
know,
are leaving.
people are leaving, and not just the disasters, whether it's fire or COVID or the snow or all the things that are happening. There's some feeling of people are passing on with that because partly because in some mysterious way they're not ready or they can't step up or they've given up or
Well, they're done.
they're done. It sounds kind of woo-woo the way I'm saying it, but there's a feeling that I have that there's part of the choices we make is how we keep going in this world that we've created.
Or not. We're at we're this age of Anthropocene. It's a time where humanity gets to choose
Mm.
how we're going to move forward. If we're going to, we can easily, if we're in pain and stuff, we can be done with this life. And uh, I think a lot of people are done. I don't know. I think they got to that threshold, and that was as far as they had to go on this journey.
Oh,
And my friends get really mad at me. Well, you just don't know enough people who died from COVID, and I'm there like, exactly. That's my journey. And it's not like I don't. It's not without compassion or without care. It's just the where I'm living in my own evolution. Trust me, I've had plenty of hard lessons that's not necessarily one that I have to have. But I said to my friend, well, why is it that you've known so many people who have left in this lifetime?
interesting. Was there an
What
answer?
is your journey that you've,
Oh,
every year you got one or two people who die? I am sorry, that's not my path, but why is it your path?
hmm. Yeah, hard question to answer.
Well, she didn't, and she just looked at me like, let's eat our dinner now.
That's good.
And she still loves me.
That's good. Well, this has been great fun talking to you. You have a lot of wisdom, and I'm glad we made it happen.